and welcome. Tonight, we are going to talk about two things: Francisco Goya and an indie game called Impasto. So, this video will be part art history and partial video game review. If that sounds interesting to you, let's get started. First, I want to tell you how I found this game and how it relates to one of my favorite painters. I spend a good amount of time on itch.io, browsing and playing indie games. It was on that website that I found a game called Impasto, which is also available on Steam, and it is completely free. This game was created by undergraduate students pursuing degrees in video game development and directed by Alex Tomkow. The plot of the game concerns Spanish painter Francisco Goya and draws inspiration heavily from his life and his artwork. Even if you aren't familiar with Goya, you have definitely seen his paintings before. I'm almost certain you've seen this one, called Saturn Devouring His Sun. It's one not easily forgotten. While many of Goya's paintings, and most of my favorites, include dark, haunting imagery and subject matter, that's definitely not the case for his entire body of work. I'm going to give you some background on Francisco Goya so that we can fully appreciate the role his legacy plays in Impasto. Goya was born in Spain in 1746 and started training with painters as a young teenager. While the first half of his career as an artist consisted of religious paintings and murals and doing tapestry and portraits for the Spanish royal court, the later half of his life was marked by deepening physical and mental torment. At the age of 47, Goya was struck with an undiagnosed illness that left him deaf for the rest of his life. And that, paired with the Peninsular War in Spain in the early 1800s, began a marked turn in the artist's paintings. They became increasingly dark, reflecting his pessimism and fears for the fate of his country and for his own health. His paintings began to feature witches, demons, and lunatic asylums as subject matter. At the age of 73, Goya purchased a home in Spain called Quinta del Sordo, which translates to House of the Deaf Man. It was actually named after the man who lived there before Goya, who coincidentally was also deaf. And of course the name was oddly fitting because Goya himself was deaf. It was at this house where Goya lived in near seclusion, and shut inside, he completed a series of 14 paintings, now known as the Black Paintings. These paintings, which include the aforementioned Saturn Devouring His Sun, are predominantly bleak and unnerving. I'll go through the paintings with you in a little bit, since they play a role in the game, Impasto. What's interesting about these paintings, besides their frightening subject matter, was that they were painted directly onto the walls of his house as murals. They covered great portions of the walls of the rooms, some of them around 14 feet long. Additionally, they were never intended to be made public. Goya told no one of the murals and left the estate to his grandson when he fled to France at age 77 in 1824, where he lived out the final 4 years of his life. In 1874, 50 years after Goya's death, the black paintings were removed from the walls of Quinta del Sordo, transferred onto canvas, given names, as Goya himself gave them none, and are now on display at the Prado Museum in Madrid. Now, I find this all to be fascinating, and apparently, so do the developers of Impasto, because the game revolves around Goya's life and art, particularly the black paintings. Allow me to tell you a little about Impasto, and we can now apply our knowledge of Francisco Goya, which will prove crucial to gaining full appreciation of the game. The game begins in a carriage, passing slowly through a dark wood. We are reading a letter from our grandfather, who has given us an inheritance of his estate. Sound familiar? Signed by who else but Goya himself. Soon, the carriage stops, and we find ourselves at Quinta del Sordo, the house of the deaf man. In the game, you are playing as the grandson of Francisco Goya, who has inherited his estate. And as we go inside the darkened house, it doesn't take long to begin finding murals on the walls, the black paintings. There were no photos of the interior of Quinta del Sordo, but a general idea of the layout of the paintings has been established, and this game has remained loyal to that, placing the murals where they would have been in the real house. When Goya obtained the house, it already had some murals on the interior walls, but they were colorful and decorative and featured rural scenes. For reasons unknown, Goya decided to paint over them, opting for a dark color palette and often dark subject matter. I imagine it would have a certain effect on one's mood being surrounded by these large, dark, and haunting murals. But in turn, Goya's mindset may have played a large role in the creation of the black paintings. At this point in his life, Goya was suffering from anxiety from several serious health scares and feared another may be upon him at any moment. He was in near isolation and was harboring great bitterness and cynicism towards mankind, following the wars in his country and the changes it brought on in the Spanish government. There were 14 murals spread among the 2 floors of the house. I won't go through all of them, but let's talk about a few of them that are featured in the game. Above the first doorway on the ground level of the villa is a painting called 2 Old Ones Eating Soup. Again, Goya did not name any of these paintings, and since he communicated with no one about the paintings, and there are no writings of his thoughts from this time in his life, both titles and meanings have been assigned to the works after his death. The 2 androgynous figures in this mural appear almost undead, either incredibly aged and near the end of their life, or perhaps some sort of reanimated corpse. Perhaps they would just appear as the name suggests, 2 old people eating soup, if it were not for the lighting and the dark color palette to lend a sinister air to the scene. Also on the first floor is Saturn devouring his son. Many have found this painting to be a reference to a tale in Roman mythology where the god Saturn, after hearing of a prophecy that foretold one of his children would overtake him, devours all his children whole upon birth, in an effort to eliminate all threat to this supremacy. We can't know for certain, though, that this was the intended reference by Goya, and some scholars have alternative theories to its meaning. Regardless, this painting is no doubt striking and unsettling, depicting a seemingly giant creature lost in the throes of madness, ripping another person apart with his teeth. Finally, let's look at this large mural that was on the second floor, called Atropos, which serves as the game's starting menu. I find this one to be a little less sinister and a little bit more mystical. The 4 figures pictured here, floating above the countryside, could be the Fates of Greek mythology. The Fates are 3 goddesses of destiny, and they all have a different function in determining the fate of each human life. One of them spins the thread that represents the timeline of an individual's life. Another measures out the thread, determining how long a life should be. And the third, Atropos, for which the painting has been named, cuts the thread of life and is the goddess of death. In Impasto, you can go through the house and inspect each of the black paintings for yourself if you like. While doing so, you come to find one of the walls of the second floor has given way to another world, a painted world. The name of the game, Impasto, refers to a painting technique where thick brushstrokes are applied. I love how the game designers have used this style of painting as the texture of the painted world. It really gives you a sense that you are in the world of the paintings, and it is, no pun intended, artfully done. The painted world is full of references to Goya's artworks, and you'll come face to face with several of the characters and subjects of his paintings. For example, the 2 old ones eating soup. If you mean to leave this world, which is a personification of all the fears and sorrows of the tortured artist himself, you will need to interact with these painted figures come to life, as they will instruct and assist you in eluding the Spanish Inquisition and other monsters. Impasto is a beautifully made game that is an excellent homage to the source of its inspiration, Francisco Goya. It is simple and effective, and not without a bit of challenging gameplay. It's a quick playthrough. You can complete it in about an hour to an hour and a half. If you're looking for a new and interesting indie game to play, then I encourage you to seek out Impasto and apply your newfound knowledge of Francisco Goya as you play along. It is available for free on Steam and itch.io. Until next time.